Jazakumullah khair for your attendance. And, this is the second Saturday night talk that we have. A little bit different than yesterday's talk. The meeting point would be, Ustadh Zaied and myself for the second time in a row. And we're hoping to go over a really, really important subject. Actually, the first step, towards Allah Azza wa Jal. And that is an inward focus, trying to figure out, what are those obstacles that are stopping me from experiencing spiritual clarity, from experiencing khushu', what's really clouding my soul, because, this subject is so critical because there's no way that we could really experience the beauty of Salah, of Quran, of dua, of being in the masjid, without first removing the toxicity that may be present in our hearts. And no matter how good we are, we're always prone to toxic elements creeping in because they're very subtle, very subtle. So, whether we're talking about bad assumptions, whether we're talking about rage and anger, sometimes we're talking about arrogance, or envy, or hatred of others, rancor, to the end of the diseases, or boastfulness, or ostentation, like riya. A lot of these diseases, have become part of daily life and daily interactions. And it really requires a lot of focus to observe our thoughts before we observe our actions. And that's something that was addressed last week when we were talking about temporary seclusion. Observing thoughts before observing actions and behavior. What am I allowing into my mind and soul? So that's the subject of the discussion. We'll see where it takes us. And again, as always, if you guys have questions, you could text it to the number, and we'll do our best to shed light on some of the causes and some of the potential solutions to this very real feeling that I think many of us feel at one point or another in our lives. I can't tell you how many times I got that type of question where someone comes with a heavy heart. I really just can't feel it. I can't feel anything in my prayers. I feel like my mind's distracted by 1,000,001 things, and I can't feel the sweetness of Ramadan or otherwise. So there's a solution for that, and I pray that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala gives us that solution. Allahumma ameen. Tfaddal Mawlana if you want to add anything as an intro.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. One of the things that our teachers say is that in our religion, there's a few beautiful distinctions between our religion and others. One is that our religion is one of the few religions on the earth that does not look at human beings as being inherently evil and sinful. So there are a lot of religious philosophies and thoughts that believe, for example, that Adam alayhi salam committed an original sin, and he was sent down to this earth as a punishment for him. Our religion doesn't believe that. The language that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran is that Adam alayhi salam had a slip. And the result of that slip was that we ended up down on this earth. But Allah doesn't use the language of punishment about us being here. So we're not looked at as being purely evil. What we're looked at is we are a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has the capacity to choose. And if you choose to purify, if you choose to adapt those internal parts of you to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling you to, you can actually beautify yourself and elevate yourself higher than the angels even. And so we're not looked at as something inherently evil, we're looked at as something inherently beautiful, in large part because Allah gave us that ability. So it's a very nuanced and balanced approach. The other thing that distinguishes our religion is that we have a very direct connection in our religious ideals between the physical and the internal. So there's nothing done physically in our religion that is meant to be purely physical. Everything we do should have an inward component and connection. And that is this is a month where you should very acutely recognize that. So the Rasul ﷺ says that sabr is half of fasting. All right? And that, did I get that right? Is it fasting half of sabr? Or sabr is half of fasting? Sabr is nusr al-iman. Yeah. Yeah, so fasting is half of sabr and sabr is half of iman. And so we're living in this moment where physically we can't drink, we can't eat, we stay up the nights. But if it was purely physical, it wouldn't really mean much. That's why the Rasul ﷺ has those famous hadith. Among them he says, the one who doesn't stop lying, and doesn't stop spreading false witness in Ramadan, Allah doesn't really need you to stop eating and drinking if that's the way you're going to behave. The idea being that nothing you do physically should remain physical. You should find some direct internal component. So the whole point behind the constriction of fasting, and this is what we were speaking about last week with seclusion, is that it's supposed to draw you to something internal. It's supposed to help you improve internally. It's not supposed to stay physically. And then lastly, to connect this back to the first point that I made, the ulama say the way that we look at our experience on this earth is just like there's a physical gravity that pulls us down to the physical earth, there is a spiritual gravity. And some of the ulama, the way they explain this, is that what really makes a Muslim, or a human being I should say, what really makes a human being a unique creation of Allah is that spiritual qalb, that spiritual heart that Allah has given us. And that heart is connected to two other distinct internal components that we have. Two other internal appendages. One is the ruh and one is the nafs. And this is just one of the ways the ulama describe it. The ruh is what connects you to the divine. It's what allows you to go upwards. And the nafs is what connects you to this world. In English you might call it the ego. You might call it your desires. And so just like there's a gravitational pull pulling you down to the earth, your nafs has a gravitational pull pulling you down to this dunya all the time. And the more you're able to control that nafs, harness that nafs, mold that nafs, the more beautiful your heart becomes, the more the ruh becomes pronounced, the closer you can float up to the divine, sort of metaphorically, and the more beautified you become. So everything about this religion, from the shahada to hajj, and everything in between, while it has a physical component, it has a very distinct internal component that's meant to allow you to break free of that gravitational pull. And just like, Allah says in the Quran that if you try to pierce the heavens, go ahead and try to pierce it. He says in Surah Al-Rahman. But you can only pierce it with a lot of power. And so if you ever watched a rocket launching into space, it requires quite a lot of energy to be produced to break free of gravity and pierce the atmosphere of the earth. Likewise, the ulama say, if you want to break free of the gravity, that internal spiritual gravity, it's going to require quite a bit of energy and activity and power. And so the entire religious experience in Islam is that practice. Putting as much as you possibly can into breaking free from the gravitational pull of the nafs so that you can rise up to that beautiful pull from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the divine. That's where I would sort of open it up, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair, Maulana. I really like that description. It's very interesting how you have certain elements bringing you down within the nafs, and then certain elements within the ruh and the soul bringing you up. I think there's a few ayat that actually describe that reality. One of them was from Surah Al-A'raf, that we recited recently, speaking about a person who Allah Azza wa Jal gave the ability to do a lot of goodness. But then something soured, something went south, and this person actually turned away from guidance. And the Quranic description is وَلَكِنَّهُ أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. But rather he was weighed down to the ground. وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ. And then he followed his whims. There's another example to the contrary, which says إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. To him, pleasant speech is lifted and elevated, and الْعَمَلُ الصَّالِح actually is the engine, right? So just like that rocket, you know, what's that rocket that helps it break free? You know, that energy that's pushing it upward is al-amal al-salih. That's what's fueling it, good deeds. You know, I guess to add to this, you know, our prayers itself actually, it's said that, you know, they're lifted above to the heavens, and or I should say the dua, they say, collides with qadar in the heavens. You have divine decree, things that are written for you, right? And then you make dua, right? And your dua, can it affect qadar? Can it affect divine decree? They say, yeah, it can. They collide in the heavens, and the qadar is coming down, your dua is going up, and it pushes the qadar away. And that is the conditional type of decree. It pushes it away, that perhaps you're protected from some type of harm, or an affliction, or a loss, because of the prayers that you make. You know, and I guess just to give one last example, I love the example so much, it gave me a few different ideas. You know, when we die, the same reality happens actually. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا لَا تُفَتَّحُ لَهُمْ أَبْوَابُ السَّمَاءِ. Those who disbelieved in our verses, the gates to the heaven are not going to open for them. The soul, when it leaves the body, it's taken by the angels. And then the angels begin to lift this soul up into the heavens. And as it's going up, they're announcing its best attributes and its best qualities and characteristics. This is the person of generosity, a person of knowledge, a person of sacrifice, a person of patience, so on and so forth, if they're a good person. And then they are brought before Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you know, bestows His pleasure upon this person, and He says to the angels, take him back to his grave and open for him a door to Jannah. And whereas the other person, when he's being lifted up, he's not granted access. He's actually barred from the heavens above, and he is sent back to his grave with a door to hellfire open for him. So I guess that upward and inward reality is real, you know, physically and metaphorically too. You know, things could really weigh a person down. You know, if diseases become dominant in my soul, they could completely cause, they could deform my humanity. That's not an understatement.
No, not at all. Actually, that last statement that you made is very, very accurate. That, like the ulama say, in order for you to experience your humanity in full, you need to actually push down the lower parts of yourself, right? And they actually say about that point about the physical and the internal. One of the examples that they give is like there's a lot of, like, who here goes out for regular runs? Like, who does regular cardio? They're pointing to one sister, right? And only one brother. Yeah. Is Wasim here? Because I know Wasim is like a marathoner. You do? But they say, the reason why I asked that question is that a lot of like mental health specialists now will tell you if you're struggling with like bouts of depression or darkness, go out for more runs or more walks. Because what happens naturally as you exert that physical energy, your body actually reacts, and your soul, they don't use this language, but what really happens is your soul actually reacts. And a lot of people will tell you, when I'm on my runs, sometimes I'm able to work through a lot of whatever's making me anxious. Right? So there is a sunnah of Allah in general, whether you're religious or not, there is a sunnah that Allah has, that the physical acts you take, every single physical act you take has an internal sort of mirror to it. It does have an internal impact. And the ulama do say that the only way that you can become beautifully human, like really become the human being that you were created to be, is to try to physically and internally now control and mold these parts of yourself. And they actually get very descriptive. All right, I'm going to need the Sheikh's help in case I forget some of these, right? But they get extremely descriptive about the non-human archetypes that we have inside of us, right? So they'll say, for example, there's like the cattle-like human being. And the cattle-like nafs is the nafs, and you might find yourself in one of these categories, that your favorite thing is just to consume. I like to eat, I like to drink, I like to, be intimate, I like to consume entertainment. That's really where I find my happiness. That's what makes me, happiness, quote unquote. We'll get into that maybe at some point later. But that's really what pulls at me the most. The second type they'll say is that of the jackal or the hyena. And that's like the predatory nafs, right? And this is like someone, if you can imagine, like in today's world, there's not a lot of soldiers anymore, there's not a lot of warriors, but in today's world you do have a lot of business people who use this type of language, right? That everything is war. It's all cutthroat. And you find a lot of people, there's a certain point after which, like, you'll make a little bit of money, and you get excited about that money, but then you reach a point where you have enough money to kind of live the life you want to live. After that, it's purely just competition. I just have to win in whatever deal I'm entering into. It doesn't matter if I really need the money, don't need the money, I just need to win. And there is a nafs that's like that. You just want to be predatory. I just need to go out and defeat whoever else is around me. And then there's a nafs that they say is shaitani. And the shaitani nafs is really just the nafs that likes to feed its like boastful ego. Am I correct in this? That's the third category? Just likes to feed its boastful ego. Like all you really care about is to show off and to sort of put yourself over others. It's not so much a competition where I just need to win out in a competition. I need to constantly show that I'm better than everybody else around me. All right, so there are these animals that you have inside. Then there's the pig, but I don't actually remember the details of the pig. But I imagine it's something like you like to sit around in your own filth in some way, right? You like to smell your own, when I was growing up, they would say about guys, there are some guys that they think that their own gas smells amazing, right? But you have these animals inside of you, all right? And what they say is these are natural things. These are natural desires that are there inside of you. And you'll find, each one of us will find one or more of these desires pull us more than others. And the only way you can really live out your humanity is to sort of domesticate these animals inside of you. And the beautiful thing is, other than the shaitani, every other one, if you can harness it, it actually brings out something very beautiful. Right? So the behemi, the livestock that likes to consume, if you harness it in the right way, that's the type of thing that gives you a motivation to actually grow as a person, to build a family, to have kids, to enjoy parts of life. Right? Without any sort of motivation to do that, why would human beings do that? If you harness the hyena, that creates courage, and it creates the ability to stand up for what's right when you need to. Right? So it's not completely negative and evil. This goes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, that we don't look at human beings as being purely sinful. There's this beautiful balance. So you have this hyena inside of you, you have a jackal inside of you, fine. Harness it, domesticate it, then you only let it out when it needs to be let out. I see some oppression happening, I see some evil happening, and a nice word doesn't stop it, I can let the jackal out. And Sayyidina Umar used to say this at times, by the way. He used to say, like, don't think that our good character is a show of weakness or a lack of knowledge of the dunya. No, we know the dunya better than you know the dunya. He used to say this to people. We know the dunya more than you know the dunya. We are just not slaves to it. And that produces a level of courage. Right? And then what was the third one that I mentioned? Other than the shaitani, the pig? I actually don't remember the other two. But you get the idea. It's a little difficult sometimes to remember all these. If the Shaykh remembers, then great. The idea being, though, that we all have these animals inside of us, these different types of desires, that if you can domesticate and harness, you become much more fully human. And then the beauty comes out. I'll stop there and see if the Shaykh has anything to correct about what I said. He's pulling up his notes. MashaAllah, the shuyukh. He already has it tagged and ready to go. MashaAllah.
No, I was actually looking at something else.
Oh, okay.
But I really like approaching it from that angle. Yet there's different nufus in us, and you don't even need to go far. When you mentioned the example of the one that has a hyena within, the cutthroat.
Yeah.
Actually, this is like a manifestation of one of the types of diseases that can come in a person. There's that quwwah of intiqam, that a person who has a very vengeful, vindictive attitude towards the people around him. I'm never going to let anything go. That's indicative of a spiritual disease.
Yeah.
Someone who is always ready to confront, and someone who's always ready to, basically get into a fight. Some people, when you step on their toes, say, qati'ah. I'm going to make dua against you. I'm not going to talk about with you for months on end, a year on end. It's very, very unfortunate. Sometimes that it can also come up in, friendship circles, family circles. Basically, I can't see myself going up unless I see everyone else around me going down. I need to put people around me down in order for me to feel fulfilled. That's a very diseased heart. I guess, what like you said it very eloquently, Maulana. These are certain aspects in our nafs. If they're misused, they end up having a very negative outcome. But if they're properly cultivated, they could actually lead to very positive things, like standing for truth, like defending your property and your possession, like having courage, a sense of courage and shaja'ah. These are all real critical things. Ghadab in itself and anger in itself is not something that's bad or deplorable. Actually, ghadab and anger could lead to a lot of goodness. But again, these are entry points. The shaitan really exploits these things to really ruin who we become. I guess, from another standpoint, the way I look at it, the heart is basically our interface. The heart is what we actually see things with. It's actually what we interact with things with. We might think of it that, I'm engaging with my eyes, with my ears, tongue, with my, limbs. But in actuality, before I interact with anything, I'm interacting with my soul. And there's so many things that point to this, Maulana. Al-arwah junud mujannada. That the souls interact with each other before the bodies do. And why is it important to really understand that? I'm experiencing things first and foremost with with my soul before the body. And if my soul is, not seeing things right, it has ghabash on it, I'm going to see good things as bad things, and I'm going to see bad things as good things. And that's actually a reality. The hadith of our Prophet ﷺ describes this, that basically what's happening with all of this, all these different examples you gave and the ones I gave earlier about the diseases of the heart, is that there are certain barriers being placed on the heart. And if these barriers continue to develop, it's going to create a sense of spiritual rust. It's going to make the spiritual waters, if you want to say, murky. And as the hadith describes, the individual's heart will be enveloped in darkness. It'll start seeing things that are bad as good and good as bad. Whereas I guess purifying the soul, and the process of purifying it is basically really just cleaning that interface so that it could see things for what they are. And that's why when we make dua, one of the most known du'as that we have is, "Oh Allah, allow me to see truth as truth is, and allow me to follow it. And allow me to see falsehood as falsehood is, and allow me to avoid it." I guess basically that's what this discussion comes down to. What does my soul look like, and how is it leading me to perceive and deal with things around me?
I actually want to go back, like you mentioned that example of like the hyena or the satanic nafs and ruining families and friends, and there's something that baffles me about that approach to dealing with people. And I'm going to go down the road of this example to just highlight some important points. Like the nafs may call you to do that. So the nafs may be calling you, like, this person upset me, they crossed me, and I have to get them back in some way. And if you do that consistently, you will find in a very short period of time in your life, you don't have any real loving relationships. All right? And everyone and everything around you is seen as just someone to compete with or push against. Whereas if you're able to push back against that sense and that desire, in a very short time frame, you'll notice all of your relationships are very loving relationships. And it's baffling to me, if you don't have loving relationships in your life, the world is a very ugly place. Like, the world is made beautiful by the loving relationships that you exist in. This is actually one of the things Allah says about marriage, that one of the signs, one of His miracles on earth is that He created this relationship of marriage because it has mawadda, because it has this unrequited love. Like, you have this love that doesn't require anything. I just love you because you are you and you're connected to me, so I love you. And that only really exists among family and among the believers. And so if you let that hyena out too much in your personal life, it very quickly disintegrates all that beauty to ugliness. And if you are able to harness it, in the immediate, it sucks. Like, the ego gets hurt a little bit. I don't know about sisters, but I know for guys, this sometimes really sucks. Like, you want to get someone back for saying something. Men especially, I know I feel it. When someone says something or does something to me that I feel wronged me, there's this, your chest comes out and you're kind of beating on it like King Kong, and you want to destruct and destroy. And if you, you really want to give into it. But if you do, very quickly you end up destroying relationships. And if you don't, some of those very relationships become, and this is a promise from the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he says, return back, like something done to you in harm, return it back with something more beautiful. You will find your enemies becoming your most beloveds. And so you may give in to the nafs, and it'll become very ugly very quickly. And you may harness the nafs, and before you know it, you're surrounded with this love, and you're so much happier. So yeah, in the immediate, the nafs feels like it's getting sort of clipped, but in the very middle to long term, you'll notice just how much more beautiful life is. And there's a statement from some of our ulama about this. They say that the level to which you will experience Jannatul Firdaus in the hereafter is equal or proportional to how well you can create a Jannah in your heart. So if you create a beautiful Jannah in your heart in this world, you will experience Jannatul Firdaus in the next. And if you create a Jahannam in your heart in this world, someone who's always angry, frustrated, trying to put people down, it's ugly, it's disgusting. And in this world, it's ugly and disgusting. And that's what you're going to get in the next world. So to whatever extent you can build a beautiful garden in your heart in this dunya, that's how much you're going to experience the beautiful garden in the next. And to whatever extent you build an ugly, disgusting inferno in this world in your heart, you'll experience that in the hereafter. Wallahu alam.
Well, subhanAllah, for me, when I think of the subject of diseases of the heart and spiritual disease, one of the things that's scariest is this idea of spiritual blindness. One of the diseases they mention is ghafla, being in a state of heedlessness, right? And what spiritual blindness does is it causes me to completely be unaware of my true state of affairs. Everyone might be seeing it, there's what I'm doing is clearly so foolish, so damaging, and I can't see it. Everyone around me tries to advise me, bring it to my attention. What are you doing? Why are you making these decisions? Why are you, insistent on following this path or being with this person or so on and so forth? Advisor after advisor tries to wake this person up, but they're just so deep in their ways, it becomes like real tunnel vision. And it's really, 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 really unfortunate and devastating. Spiritual blindness is a scary thing for me whenever I think about it, Maulana. And when you couple that with the fact that spiritual disease, when it takes charge of a person, it could really cause so much damage in their personal life. It makes it so much clearer why I really need to give this subject some attention. Just look at the Quran. When you think about spiritual disease, you want a really good example? Look at what the Quran says about hypocrites. Munafiqeen, when you read about Allah and how He describes their attributes, you say, man, what an awful person to be around. That's what it is. Spiritual disease makes being near to that person with the spiritual disease very, very uncomfortable and disgusting. Especially if my heart's, in a healthy state of affairs. Of course, if I'm just as diseased or even worse, then of course I'm not going to even realize it. It's just going to be toxicity over toxicity. But look at the munafiqeen. When Allah tells us there are people that they're always trying to prove themselves by taking oaths. يَحْلِفُونَ بِاللَّهِ لَكُمْ. They're swearing that they do this, and they're swearing that they never do that, and they're swearing kada. You'll never find in the Quran that the believers are ever said to do a halif, that they say wallahi. You could just even, by the attitude and their feeling, it's just like, all right, the munafiqeen, they're a people that want to see others fail. That's a disease. That's hasad. We were talking about it recently. Envy. That they وَدُّوا لَوْ تَكْفُرُونَ كَمَا كَفَرُوا فَتَكُونُونَ سَوَاءً. There are people who just want you to fall into kufr just so you could, and disbelief just so you could be like them. How many people have that approach in life? All right, they see a brother or a sister excelling, and in the back of their minds, they realize how much of a failure they are, and they want to just see this person come crashing down so it could make them feel good about themselves. That's a disgusting state of affairs, but it's just too common among people. Or there are people that really don't appreciate the goodness that others bring to the table. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, الَّذِينَ يَلْمِزُونَ الْمُطَّوِّعِينَ فِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. There are people that, the believers are coming, giving their charities. Oh, this person, he's showing off. Oh, it's a small amount of money. Oh, who cares? Who cares about what this person's bringing? It's nothing. It's pennies. They just have this like negative vibe to them. And that's coming from the spiritual disease. Whereas the mu'min, when the heart's clear, the mu'min making dua for his brother and sister, making dua for the success of his other, and always giving good advice and nasiha, always encouraging, always protecting the honor of his brother, or protecting the honor of her sister, as the hadith mentions, and وهكذا. This is just something that came in my mind about nifaq, and basically what spiritual disease looks like practically.
Yeah, subhanallah, like the Shaykh talking about like being unaware of your own sort of shortcomings, and that being one of the biggest signs of a spiritual disease. The only people who are able to be critical of themselves are generally people who are good. Right? This is over and over again, Allah says this in the Quran. So Allah says, for example, in many places in the Quran, that He allows evil people, and He allows the shaitan to also do this to evil people. He allows them to be convinced of their own positions. So it's very rare that you see someone, if you see someone in your life, if you know someone, if we're talking and you're thinking about someone in your life, that like, man, that person's really ugly, I think that's the type of person they're talking about, that person will almost never accept critique. And they are genuinely convinced that they're righteous and good. This is actually one of the ways Allah lets people sort of wallow in their misery. Like you're so unwilling to work on yourself, then I'll just let you see darkness for light and light for darkness. And so it's very, very easy to fall into that. And one of the things, because we get this, I don't know if this question came in yet, but one question we get often is how do you make sure to stay away from that? One thing is you do have to develop the ability to honestly and sincerely critique what's happening inside of you. All right, so we get this question quite often about if I just have a thought or a desire, is it a sin if I don't act on it? And the answer normally is no, it's not a sin. But that's only from the halal haram perspective. If you have a thought that develops inside of you, so you have a thought that comes up where you see someone, like the Shaykh was saying, you see someone who's doing something good, and the feeling inside of you is one of jealousy and I want to see that person trip up, you need to be able to notice that. You have to get into the habit of noticing that and stopping that right there. And then trying to do the opposite of that. You know what? I don't like that I had that thought. I'm going to make dua for that person right now. Ya Allah, give them sincerity, beautify their character, increase them, accept from them. And that way you beat, this is going to sound harsh, but it really is what you want to do. You want to actually beat that nafs down. Every time that nafs is going to throw up a thought, I want to beat it back down. No, you're going to listen to me. I'm not going to listen to you. You're going to listen to me. You're going to listen to my heart. I'm not going to listen to the nafs. And every time you do that, the nafs gets domesticated more and more. And every time you fail at doing that, the heart gets consumed more and more by the nafs. All right. Now, if you're not there yet, this is another question that we get. What if I'm still new and I'm not exactly sure if I'm able to see or not? This is where, and Shaykh Osamah has always talked about this quite a bit over the years, this is where a suhbah salihah becomes key. Like really good friendship or really good mentorship becomes key. Because you do need to ask people outside of you, like, hey, I'm not sure if I'm seeing this thing right. I think I'm right, but do you think I'm right? Do you see where I'm making a mistake? Do you see where I'm wrong? And I can tell you, may Allah inshallah preserve his sincerity. One thing I love about Shaykh Osamah is that no matter how many times I've seen him be wronged over the years, like people will say or do something to him, and people like mashayikh in his position get like mistreated all the time, unfortunately. But no matter how many times he gets mistreated, he'll call me and say, can I tell you about this situation? I just want to make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. And like 99% of the time, I'm listening to him and I'm like, this poor guy. And he's so, may Allah keep him sincere and pure. He's so sweet. He doesn't know. He just doesn't know.
So that's what you've been saying in the back of your mind?
In the back of my mind, this poor guy, man.
I never knew.
He's so sweet. He doesn't know how sweet he is, right? But he always calls, and he always wants to make sure and double check and triple check. Right? And that is a very important tool. If you don't have that in your life, you want to try to find that. Either with people who are your friends now that you trust. These are people who are trying to get closer to Allah, trying to get better. Or find yourself a mentor, whether that be a father, an uncle, an older brother, or someone from the community that you can connect with that can start to pick apart or at least help you identify your own shortcomings and your own weaknesses. You know, if you guys heard me talk about it yesterday with Sheikh Yasser, right? He used to always tell me, I told you guys yesterday, for those who were here, that I raffis. I told you guys in Arabic, right? That I buck. Every time someone gives me a critique, my immediate reaction is to be like, no, that's not true. And Sheikh Yasser was one of the first people to start pointing that out about me. Like, your immediate reaction is to say, no. And he used to, like, it's okay, Sheikh Yasser won't mind me saying this. He would just tell me, shut up and listen. Like, it's all right. You're bad sometimes. You can adjust yourself. And it was extremely, Wallahu alam, I don't know if it's helped me get better, but I find it to be something extremely valuable, that I can call Sheikh Yasser up and ask him, and he'll tell me point blank, yeah, you're being stupid. Like, just don't. What you're doing is wrong, you need to make amends. Or sometimes he'll tell me, you're being too soft, you're perfectly fine, you should go ahead and get back at this guy in whatever way you need to. All right, so find someone who can help you if you're not there yet. We do have some questions coming in, Sheikh. I don't know if you want to take that or if you want to comment on that.
I did have a comment, I guess to that point, the example you gave about you and Sheikh Yasser, I think that is something that could be addressed in a little bit more detail. I think it's, just to not keep this in the realm of theory and just like, okay, we're just talking about a bunch of different ideas and how could I really implement this in my life? I need to have those types of relationships that are like sort of like spiritual companionship. The companions, the tabi'een, the earlier generations, they used to do this all the time. Let us revive our faith for an hour. A lot of you here maybe in part of halaqat, where you have a more, intimate relationship with some of your brothers or some of your sisters, in terms of, opening up about your personal affairs. I think that's really important to have that type of relationship where there are some people who, are mentors or people that, you trust could be good mirrors for you, to give you feedback about, some of the things that are going on inside. Obviously, those things, we're not going to announce them to the world. But if I keep them all to myself, then, my growth is going to be really limited. If I don't, when I say al-mu'min mir'at akhi, the brother is the mirror of the brother, a sister is the mirror of a sister. If the only thing I know about my brother, who's in the masjid is, he's the guy I always say salam to every time I see him at Isha, then how on earth he's going to be a mirror for me? If I don't really have anyone involved in my personal life issues on that level, either a real close, trusted friend or a mentor, then how on earth am I ever gonna, be able to get an impartial assessment of something that I'm doing, saying, or dealing with? We all need that type of relationship, no matter who we are, no matter how learned or not we are. We all need that type of feedback from those around us. I guess that's to one point, about what you just said. The other thing I wanted to ask, I don't know how you would answer this, Ustadh Zaied, is how do I know if there's no diseases in my heart? How do I know if I clean my heart completely and I just have a pure heart now?
Oh, if you think that, then you have the worst disease of all. Yeah, you're in like serious trouble. That's a state of arrogance. There's no human being in today's world who should feel that way. There's always going to be diseases in your heart. This struggle does not stop. And in fact, one of the questions that I'm sure has already come up, and we get it a lot, is like the difference between the nafs and the shaitan. And one of the clear differences is the shaitan will oftentimes come to you with like really weird, out of nowhere ideas. The nafs will come back to you with the same thought over and over and over and over again. It's just a part of who you are, right? So, like, if you're tempted to watch something you shouldn't watch, you say, no, I'm not going to watch it. And then the nafs will come back, no, but I want to watch it. It's like a kid. This is what the ulama say about the nafs. It's like a little kid. I want candy, no, you can't have candy. But I want candy, but you can't have candy. But I want candy, but you can't have candy. Until you just get so annoyed, it's like, just be quiet, I'm not going to give you candy. And so the nafs doesn't stop. There's no point in your life where the nafs is going to stop. What does happen though, definitely, is that you will find over time, certain desires that you've struggled against will get less and less pronounced. But then other desires will come up. So the nafs will come up in other ways. And especially, like the common trend is that when you're younger, some of the more like base desires are more pronounced. And then as you get older and some of those desires you've controlled and you've dealt with them in a halal way, then some other more like really hurtful desires come out. Like things like ego and showing off and riyā and the love of money and the love of jah, like the love of prestige. Right? So the nafs is always going to come back with new things. So if you think, like I have no diseases, you are like destroyed. May Allah save you.
Allah I'm serious that our nafs could really give us some serious illusions of our greatness and our grandeur. The diseases, there's a really long list of diseases of hearts. Just like you said, like that the pursuit of power, loving power, being power hungry, wanting to assert your power upon others, is just one of those diseases that is just very, very, very commonly plagues people. But I guess to that point, that's why qalb was named the qalb, by the way. The word qalb in Arabic refers to, flipping something, right? شُمِّيَ الْقَلْبِ بِذَلِكَ لِتَقَلُّبِهِ. It's constantly in a state of change, and that's not a bad thing, but that's exactly how we begin to refine our souls. When I realize that this is something that, there's no end to really in terms of how much I could grow. I need to always be vigilant and be aware. There's one of the Salaf, he said, I struggled with my intentions for 20 years until I felt like I was a little bit more in control and a little bit more able to guard my intentions. That's just another disease among many diseases. Like, how can I really, control myself from starting to do good things for all the wrong reasons? I'm doing good thing, why? Just to get my name out there, or just so people start recognizing me, or I'm going through the motions just so, I can, let's be real, like sometimes people come to masajid, to volunteer work, to Islamic organizations, not necessarily for the work, or not necessarily for the service, but maybe for an ulterior motive. I'm coming to prayer just so I can see fulan, or see fulana, or just so I can perhaps achieve something else that I want in my personal life. Why am I doing what I'm doing? That's a real difficult question to answer, for the mu'min. And the one, someone who's only sincere, real sincere, can be real critical of himself in this sense. Wallahu a'lam.
I also did want to comment like that, just so that no one misunderstands. Sheikh Yasser and I developed that relationship when we were younger, not because we were like special. We had mentors. I mentioned one of them last week, Tariq Dahmis, rahmatullah alayh, who insisted on that. We used to sit in halaqat with them, and they used to tell us this relationship is going to be very important for you as you grow older, and you have to develop it with one another. You have to invest in this relationship. They kind of forced the issue. Like, I know you're not comfortable, but you're going to have to invest in this relationship. And so it wasn't out of nowhere. And so anyone can do it, and it's very, very helpful to find older people who've gone through it already and can mentor you. And mentor maybe some of you together in a halaqah, because that's really one of the biggest reasons why a halaqah is important. It's not necessarily just the ilm that you get from it, it's that you develop these deep bonds with people who are on the same pathway as you. And so you can feel a lot more comfortable being vulnerable in front of them. And then also, just so that, I mean, I know we have a lot of young faces here, but inshallah some of you will get married soon. You do want to try to also develop that mirror-like relationship in your marriage with your spouse over time. That you trust them enough and they trust you enough that you can be honest with one another and sort of pick at one another when need be. And nothing's worse than a spouse who doubles down on your nafs. Like, you guys are going to really ruin each other. Right? What's beautiful is when a spouse is able to pull you back from the brink. Like, you're about to do something really bad, and the spouse is able to tell you, I think you're going down a bad road. And what's really ugly is when you're about to do something really bad and the spouse comes in like, yeah, that's the way we're going to go. Like, this family, that's the way we are. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that, inshallah. There are a lot of questions coming in, though.
Yeah, sure. You could start looking at them. But in the meantime, I guess to add to that whole halaqah idea and that notion, really is this journey to Allah is not really meant to be one that's haphazard, one that's really individualistic, that really doesn't involve, my social circles and those around me. It's meant to be a collective effort. We're not just saying that just to say it. Does it need a structured approach? Like, if I'm really going to overcome those diseases within, if I'm really going to experience the beauty of prayer, the beauty of spiritual awareness, does it need a structured approach? Yeah. What do you guys think when you think about worship? Do you guys notice structure in it, in our deen? Now think about it. When you think about Salah and fasting and Hajj and Zakah and everything, all these different types of acts of worship, do you guys see structure in that system? Yes or no? You guys see it, right? The whole thing is all structured. It's all about structure. Whether it's the Salah, the prayers that are spaced out throughout the day, Ramadan and that special, a yearly regiment that we have with Ramadan and or with Hajj and all of its structure. If I'm really gonna grow spiritually, I need to invest in my soul. And that's a serious thing. It can't be just, okay, I'm listening to something here, a YouTube lecture, I attended an event there, I maybe participated in a few things here and there. No, if I really want to grow, I need to build certain relationships. I need to put a good infrastructure in place. Because I'll tell you, like, when it comes to, there's something called spiritual addictions. There's the addictions, that destroy persons spiritually. When we're talking about those types of addictions, no matter how much prayer you make, it's not going to evaporate and disappear. If I really don't deal with the stressors, no matter, Zaid was talking about, you were talking earlier about how, the nafs is going to tell you, do it, and you need to push back and say, don't do it, and this struggle. I've sat with so many people that, it's like, it becomes like a very, possessive thing, this possessive thought that takes hold of a person, and they really can't shake it off. I'm trying to avoid looking at something I should not be looking at. I'm trying to avoid not going to certain places I shouldn't be going, but I can't help it. I find myself so weak and I buckle under the pressure of my nafs. That type of pressure is real. Sometimes you can't shake it off all by yourself. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes, it leads to a lot of regret. I really didn't want to go meet that guy or meet that girl and do what I ended up doing, but I just couldn't help it. I couldn't. I felt like I felt like so weak and powerless in the face of the thought, and that's what happens when you're alone, when you don't deal with those stressors that are, leading to those ends, Allah alam.
It also happens when you're not able to get yourself out of your own thought patterns, which again was why like bouncing your struggles off of people help, because we have a tendency to lie to ourselves and convince ourselves of stuff that isn't real. And we can make things that are small big and things that are big small. And having someone kind of tell you, it's not a big deal, just don't do it, sometimes can be enough. But we'll take one question at a time. I did get one question that came in that I'll touch upon very briefly because it had to do with something I specifically said. What do I mean by Jannah in your heart? And what I meant by that was as you harness the nafs and you beautify the heart, there's no other way for me to describe it. Inshallah, when you do it, you'll feel your heart is more beautiful. And I don't mean that in like an arrogant way. You'll just feel lighter. Life will feel better. Like the world doesn't seem as bleak and dark and ugly. And that's a Jannah. That's what I mean. It's like a garden. Like imagine walking in a garden. Like everything around you is beautiful. You like to look at it. You like to see it. There might be some like bees that might sting you, but that's not what you focus on. You focus on the beauty. And so that's what I meant by Jannah. That's what the ulama meant by Jannah in your heart, and that's what I quoted there. Wow, they're coming in pretty fast. I apologize so much. So I'll start from the first question. How can I improve my concentration and drive for Salah? Should we skip this one, just stay on topic, or should we take it? All right, well, I'll say a couple of quick things. Number one, focus and khushu' in general, and specifically in Salah, it's one of these like ironic things. All you can do is say do it. Like there's really not much else. You're going to lose focus, refocus. You're going to lose it again, refocus. You're going to lose it again, refocus. But there are some like small tips you can do. You can force yourself to make wudu before every salah. Not like there's a very practical bonus to that, and that is that you're going to stop watching the phone or watching whatever or reading whatever you're reading, and so you're giving yourself a few minutes before you enter into salah to actually disconnect, I should say. There's also the fact of praying the sunnah. So I'm going to pray a sunnah before I actually start my salah, because by the time there's a statement that a lot of like the ubad have, that like their best salawat would be the 2 rak'ahs of sunnah after the fard, because they've already prayed sunnah before the fard, they've prayed the fard, and now they're finally able to focus in the sunnah. May Allah Ta'ala give us at least that much focus, alhamdulillah. And so like just getting the repetitions in sometimes help you, and you might notice it in Ramadan, by the way, that as Ramadan goes on, the more nights you've spent in salah, the easier it gets to focus in salah and be with the Quran. I can keep moving on unless you want to say something to that question, Shaykh.
No, keep moving on.
Seeking wealth or being career oriented, is it haram?
Of course not.
Okay. That's it?
So seeking wealth is definitely not something that's bad. It could actually be very virtuous. Now, of course, depends on with what spirit and attitude I'm seeking it. If I'm seeking it at the expense of my deen, if I'm seeking it regardless of the boundaries of Allah Azza wa Jal, if I'm seeking it at the expense of other people, then of course it's going to be bad. But seeking it in itself is not something that's bad, because wealth could be used for a lot of good things. However, one shouldn't ask Allah Azza wa Jal for this in itself. We could ask Allah Azza wa Jal for afiyah. We could ask Allah Azza wa Jal for fulfillment of needs. But I don't know necessarily if wealth would be good for me. And that's an important realization. I don't know necessarily if I had a lot of wealth that it would make me a better person. Because for some people, gaining wealth is their downfall. For other people, losing wealth is their downfall. Really, there's no one thing that's the best thing for everybody. Everyone and their reality is different, and that's why the ask from Allah Azza wa Jal should be something that is more general. because you might ask for something and then you realize when you get it, you wish you never had it. Yeah. Wallahu a'lam.
That's why the dua from our beloved Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhab an-nar. Oh Allah, give us in this dunya what's good, what's great and excellent and beautiful, and give us in the akhirah what's great and beautiful and excellent, and protect us from the fire of hell. But I do want to comment on this a little bit more though. The question was, is it haram? No, it's not haram, but the language used is a little bit loaded given the modern day context. So wealth is not looked upon as evil in our religion, but the Rasul ﷺ did say that he will be resurrected with the masakin, with the people who are in need. He did say that the masakin will get in 500 years. They'll get into Jannah 500 years earlier than the wealthy of this ummah. And so there is a recognition that wealth has the capacity to really harden the heart and distract someone. And the wording of being career oriented is what scares me. Right? Because I am oriented around my career. My identity is wrapped up in my career. My self-worth is wrapped up in my career. And there's a lot there. If you're allowing yourself to think like that, you're not very far off from being completely consumed by the dunya. Because the only thing I'm going to judge myself by now is how well am I doing in my career? How much money am I making? How much have I climbed the ladder? How much far ahead have I gotten? That's not haram. The Shaykh said it's not haram. But I would really caution you against it, because you're going down a pathway that can really kill the nafs. What you want to do, the way I would word it, you do want to find sustenance for yourself and your family. That is halal and good. You want to use the talents Allah gave you to do good in this world. That is wonderful and beautiful. And that is ibadah. More than that, leave the results to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to be oriented around something, be oriented around Allah. And I don't mean that in a cheesy statement way. Actually make what you're oriented around in life Allah. If the right ibadah is for me to work, I'll work. If the right ibadah is for me not to work, I won't work. That's the way we want to orient ourselves. We don't want to be oriented around our careers. Our careers are something we have or something we do. It's not who we are or what we are.
There's this one that caught my attention, Maulana. It says, how do you go about guiding a relative who has an ugly heart? Without coming off as, I'm better than you, holier than thou. How do you correct this person or guide this person? What's the best approach to dealing with egocentric people? Look, I may have an ugly heart, right? It's really important to never lose sight of that. Whenever we talk about spiritual things, it's really important to try to approach that stuff with an introspective attitude. Introspective, meaning I'm dealing with this on a personal level first and foremost. Sometimes people like to weaponize, religious things. Oh yeah, that's what makes a person arrogant. I know who that's talking about. It is fulana al-fulaniya. This fits her perfectly. She's such an arrogant person, right? That's not what it's meant to do. That's not what we're meant to do with this type of information, because I guarantee you would be pressed to find a person who doesn't have elements of arrogance in their heart. It's there, maybe at varying degrees, and we all need to work on it. So that's for starters. The second thing is, I kind of feel what you may be referring to. There's some people that you might be tested with in your life that are just like, they're always right, they're always assertive on their opinion, they could care less for empathy or for those around them. There's a lot of people like that, unfortunately. But I always like to remind people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the likes of Abu Talib and Hamza. And He also blessed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the likes of Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab. Seriously. And it's not out of any goodness in them. Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab, lousy individuals in the garbage bins of history. right? Worthless human beings that did atrocious things during their lives. Abu Jahl, the Fir'aun of this ummah. However, for the Prophet ﷺ, having the likes of an Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab strengthened certain muscles within. And sometimes Allah will put you in that type of reality. And some people, when they look at their circumstance and they realize, oh, why do I have to deal with this type of difficult people or that type of person? You never know. Perhaps you dealing with a difficult father or a difficult mother or some type of circumstance that or like infighting between siblings and just or something of the sort. You never know. Maybe perhaps that type of reality is actually what's strengthening your character as a person. And that's not something that we should seek to run away from. That's the important thing here. There's a lot of difficult people in this world. We should try to hope that we're not one of them. And we should also realize that if I have to deal with difficult people, if I deal with it in the right way, I could come out a much better person on the other end. Wallahu alam. Yeah, he's not going to enter Jannah with that atom's worth of arrogance in their heart. It's going to be purified and melted away, either by the difficulties of the grave or the challenges and the calamities of the Day of Judgment, because not every believer is going to be in the shade and upon the fountain and experiencing grand bliss on the Day of Judgment. Some people are going to be called to account for their actions. Right? So that's what that hadith means. Meaning that arrogance bars a person from accepting truth, and as long as a person rejects truth, they're not Jannah worthy. There's certain things that they're going to go through that might perhaps clean their slate, and they're not going to enter Jannah until their slate is clean. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah.
But I do want to also clarify what Sheikh Osamah was saying. Was more that, when I said it I remember 20 minutes ago or so, I said you might be thinking about someone specific, and when I said it, I thought to myself, I'm going to have to clarify this point, because if you're thinking that, you're in trouble. What he meant by that was that if you're doing this task right, of spiritual purification, you will be so aware of your own shortcomings that you will never rush to judge or write off anybody else, because you'll know that 10,000 times a day I have a bad thought, and I think so and so about this person, and I have to struggle against it. So who am I to judge this person or to write them off? And so if you're approaching someone as man, that person has a really ugly heart, I'll get into a minute the few exceptions, but most of the time that's a sign that your own heart is a little bit has a little bit of trouble. Because you want to be in a state where you're very aware of your own shortcomings. That's more what the Sheikh was talking about. So no one should feel like, oh, I'm completely free of arrogance, because it's almost impossible. All of us have an ego. Now we may struggle with that ego better than others, but only Allah really knows how successful we are, right? Now there are some moments where it's there's an exception. There are just really toxic people. And it becomes clear over time that they're toxic. But that becomes clear through their repeated aggressions, not through your judgment of their heart. You'll find that over and over and over again, the person hurts you. No matter what you've tried to do, the person hurts you. No matter how nice you've tried to be, the person hurts you. You've accepted that you've made some mistakes, the person hurts you. Now it's not about judging their heart. Now what you're saying is, this person consistently hurts me, I need to stay away from this person. That's the exception. You're judging it on the actions, not on you reading their heart and what their heart is worth. Do you have the next one, Sheikh? Or do you want me to just pick one up?
You can pick one up.
All right. That's good. They're coming in really fast. So there are several, I'll do this one because there are several that came in like this. How do you deal with the shaitan? How does the shaitan relate to this whole thing, and how do you deal with them, right? Do you want to take this one, Sheikh?
What is it? What's the question?
Annoy him? Ignore him. Beautiful advice. What is the relationship between the shaitan and the nafs, and how do you deal with the shaitan?
Well, the shaitan is fighting for your nafs, for the qalb. There's basically there's actually in the words of Imam Ghazali in the Ihya, he describes the battle for the heart. Basically, you have the forces of the devil and satanic impulses, and the forces of Ar-Rahman and the angelic forces. They're fighting and converging upon the heart, and whichever wins, that's where the dominant force in this person is going to be. It's a fight for the heart. What's the shaitan really trying to take control over? The qalb, the heart, because the heart is the king of the body. The heart's really directing our tasarruf and our actions, right? So what's the relationship between the shaitan and my nafs? Basically, the shaitan's whole strategy is, how can I weaken this person's defenses on every angle between shahawat, desires, and shubuhat, misconceptions, and weaken this person's defenses in terms of what they use their eyes for, what they use their mind for, what they use their ears for, and how can I, by doing that, paralyze them spiritually? That's what the shaitan's trying to do. Essentially, in the end of the day, that's what he's trying to do. And that's why, and the evidence from this is really in a lot of the hadith that clarify to us that the shaitan, the way he penetrates is through the nadra, through the a nadra sahm masmuma min iblis. What you look at, what you listen to. The Prophet ﷺ describes to us that there is a type of fornication that happens with the ear, right? The ear fornicates just as the person might fornicate, and that is basically with what you allow yourself to consume and digest. There was a question that I recently got by someone. He was asking on behalf of another person that this person's a college student, and he said, I can't help myself. There's just too much fitna around me on the college campus, and my mind's always thinking about lustful things, and I just want a fatwa that allows me to do personal things in my private time that are not allowed, istimna and so on and so forth. Is it okay for me to do that? And of course, this person, how did their nafs become like this? Where I just constantly have lustful thoughts, bad thoughts that are very possessive that I really can't push away. There's a reality that leads the nafs to become that person. He didn't just wake up one day and all of a sudden, this person's different than every other guy, or this sister is different than every other sister. What am I exposing my nafs to? The shaitan weakened my defenses. That's what happened. What I'm looking at, what I'm listening to, what I'm engaging in, the people that I surround myself in, with, all of this creates a certain, toxic ecosystem that makes it really difficult for me, or in my soul and my ruh, to thrive. Wallahu alam.
I do want to just add one, well, it'll end up being 2 points, but they all revolve around one central theme. We always get this question at the start of Ramadan, like, if the shaitan is locked up, like, why do I still do bad things? Why am I still not focused in my salah? And it speaks to like a fundamental misunderstanding of why we sin. And a lot of it has to do with this like desire to pass off blame. It's not my fault I sin, it's the shaitan's fault. No, it's your fault. All right, at the end of the day, it's your fault. In fact, Allah says this in the Quran, that on the Day of Judgment, Iblis will stand up and say, I had no control over you. All I did was invite you, and you listened. All right, and that's the truth. He has no control over you. Your nafs though, your nafs which is inside of you, is his weapon. And the Rasul ﷺ says this explicitly. He says you should fight, the biggest enemy you have is the one between your two sides, i.e. your nafs. The shaitan just uses it. Right? So don't get tricked into thinking he has more power than he does, and don't get tricked into letting yourself off the hook. Yes, the shaitan is going to try to make it easier for your nafs to take control, but he has no control over you. You have control. right? And you can easily shoo him away. You actually can. إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. You can easily shoo him away. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to listen to this, and so on. And one of like the most recent cultural examples of this, I won't mention the names because they don't deserve to be mentioned in this holy sacred place, the house of Allah, on a night like this. But the recent sort of hubbub that happened in one of the academy shows, where a smack happened, and then the person who did the smacking stood up, and a part of his statement was, at your highest moments, the devil will come for you. And when I saw this, I was like, my God, like how deluded some of these people are. And I used to be a big fan of his. Alhamdulillah, Allah protected us. May Allah protect him soon and guide him, inshallah. But how deluded this person is. It's not my fault I did this. The devil came for me. No, ya Habibi. No, you did it. Like, you walked up on that stage and did it. Don't try to pass off blame now, right? So, and this is a very common thing. I got the question just a few days ago. I was driving with my father to Aisha, and he's like, I got this question today. Someone was asking me, how come in Ramadan I'm still distracted in my salah? Right? If the shaitan's not here, why am I still distracted? It's the same exact reality. That guy on stage about the smack, and that question, same exact problem. It's not my fault, it's the shaitan's fault. No, at the end of the day, it's you. Take control, take responsibility, don't pass it off. Yes, he will come do waswasa. Say a'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan ar-rajim and try to focus your nafs. Do you have the next one up, Shaykhi?
No, I don't.
Oh. Did you want to say something more?
No.
Okay. Did you want to stop?
No. If you have another question, go ahead.
Okay, so there is another one that relates to what we said last week. How can you control your nafs in those moments of temporary seclusion when you are just left alone with your nafs? Do you understand it?
How can you?
How can you control your nafs in those moments of seclusion when you're left alone with your nafs?
How can you control your nafs? So, look, I'm either weak and powerless before my nafs, or I find in myself spiritual strength. It's all going back to really the same point, my nafs, the debased or in the lower aspects of my lesser self, either is in charge, or those finer elements of, spiritual strength is in charge. And, we see in the Ramadan dynamic that, things change for most people. That, we feel that we could come at 12 a.m. to the masjid and spend a few hours in prayer and so on and so forth. And outside of Ramadan, there's no way on earth I would be able to do that. Many people, that's the sentiment there, that there's something that changes, so, and this, really goes back to, is the shaitan weak or strong? Well, it depends, if the dynamics are there, he could be really strong. And if the dynamics are different, then perhaps that I'll realize that inna kayda shaitani kana da'ifa, the plotting of the devil is really weak. So really, if you're in that state where you find in your alone time, that's when most of the wrongdoing is happening. Either with observing certain things, or chatting with certain people, or functioning in a certain way. If that's where most of the sin is coming, when there's no one around, then perhaps you're not in a state where you could be alone with your nafs. That's perhaps an indicator for you that I need to decrease that alone time. That's why the scholars, they say, "Lam tushghil nafsaka bil haqq, shagalatka bil batil." If you don't consume yourself with goodness, it'll consume you with falsehood. I need to, be able to work towards getting to that point where when I'm alone, the first thing I think about is not going to be sin. Right, and of course we're all weak, we're all susceptible to sin. That's not to say anything, but how can I control my nafs when I'm alone with my nafs? Basically, it's going to be based on your current reality and your spiritual growth. Can you? Allahu a'lam. That depends. Are you really in control, or are those other shahwani elements more dominant there? If they are, then in that case I would say, try to busy yourself with things, try to surround yourself with good people, try to go to the masjid instead of praying alone, and so on and so forth. So the directive changes from person to person.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykhna. The next question, if you control the hyena too much to the point that it's suppressed, is there an Islamic remedy to that? So that's good. If you suppressed it, that's actually a good thing. But I think what the person, I'm going to assume this is a brother, but I could be wrong. I'm going to assume it's a brother. Yeah, a lot of times I feel like questions like this come up because we don't know how to like put words to what we want to achieve in life. In this case, the hadith that comes to mind is a very famous hadith from the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, "Inna al-mu'min al-qawiyyu khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if wa fi kullihuma khayr." That the strong believer is better in the eyes of Allah and more beloved to Allah than a weak believer, and there is good in all of them, or there is good in both of them. So there is a divine call to every man and woman to be as strong as you possibly can. That means physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, spiritually, financially. This is something that Allah loves, that you have capabilities, that you know how to do things, you know how to get things done, you know how to be impactful, you know how to stand up for what's right. Right? So being strong is something Allah loves, more than being weak. And so yes, suppress the hyena, but then strive to be strong because Allah loves strength. Right? And that should be your motivation. Not overcoming other people or outcompeting other people. I want to become as strong as I possibly can be because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves strength. And then use it from there, inshallah. I don't know if you want to say anything more to that, Shaykh.
There was one question that we got here. Are there examples of sins that will never be forgiven? You know, are there any examples of sins that will never be forgiven? The way I would address this question is, as long as we're in this dunya, you can always come back from whatever you find yourself falling into. And that's important to realize that, especially for someone who after the fact, they realize that they've done a lot of things that they regret. As long as we're in this dunya, we could retreat back from any wrongdoing that we potentially committed. However, keep in mind, and especially, and I say this to someone who is considering doing a sin or before the fact, realize that it's not about what's going to be forgiven or not forgiven, but certain sins are really difficult to come back from. Certain sins are really difficult to come back from. It's not very easy when you do a lot of oppression and you take the rights of others, or you hurt people, you ruin people's lives. You know, when you do something that bad, because you know what, tawbah is tawfiq, by the way. You know, if you're sitting here right now and you regret certain things you've done and you want to be a better person, and you're trying to figure out how you could, purify yourself and live a, healthier spiritual life and so on and so forth, you're blessed. You're blessed. You would never think like this had Allah Azza wa Jal not enabled you to think like that. And that's what the verse says. ثُمَّ تَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَتُوبُوا. Allah repented on them so they could repent. So if I'm feeling feelings of regret, that's the doorway to tawbah. Now I need to follow through, of course, if I really want to reap the benefits of it. But certain sins are really difficult to come back from. One of those things that's really difficult to come back from is boasting about kaba'ir, boasting about major sins. That's really difficult to come back from. They say that usually someone who's boastful about their sins, la yuwafaq lit-tawbah. That person who is like just loud and public about it, because along with the kabira that they're doing, the major sin, they're doing something else that's so awful. It's a form of defiance of God, defiance of Allah Azza wa Jal. I did this and I'm proud, and I'm going to announce it to the world, right? That type of person is in a very, very deep hole, very deep hole. Like the biggest of the kaba'ir, al-mubiqat, right? The sab' al-mubiqat. There's a reason why they're called the 7 fatal sins, right? There's a reason why they're that. It is because repenting from that needs a real special effort. It's not just like, I fell into backbiting or something like that, or I assumed ill of another person, and I'm just going to do a lot of istighfar and hopefully Allah will forgive me from it. It's not one of those things. Like someone falls into fornication and zina, wal-'iyadhu billah. That is one of the fatal sins. To come back from that it needs a lot of effort and a sincere repentance and an immediate stop to actually doing the sin in order for me to have tawfiq to repent from something like that. So that's the twist that I would give to that question. It's not that things won't be forgiven, but there are certain things that when you do them, it's real difficult to take them back, and you really need to work hard to dig yourself out of that hole. Allah.
There's a question that came in, always comes up as well, about like, how do I've been a sinner for a long time, now I want to turn back to Allah, but I feel like an imposter. That's one of the falsehoods that the nafs can convince you of, and the shaitan does love to use that specific argument, that like, yeah, who do you think you are? You did all these bad things, now you think Allah's going to forgive you? Yes, wallahi, He will forgive you. You're not an imposter. We all sin. I think one of the other things that happens is that people begin to define themselves into boxes. So they'll look at maybe someone like Sheikh Osamah and say, that's a religious person. I'm not that. And so Sheikh Osamah is deserving of Allah's mercy, but not someone like me. That's rubbish. No, we're all imperfect humans on a journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't know what's in my heart. You don't know how I've sinned. And I don't know what's in your heart and how you've sinned. Don't assume that of yourself. You are just as beloved to Allah and just as worthy of Allah's tawbah and His mercy. Don't ever let yourself or the shaitan convince you that you're an imposter. The second you turn back to Allah, wallahi, He accepts you back. And it doesn't matter where you've been or how far you've fallen or how deep or disgusting your sin has been, wallahi, you can come back to it, come back from it, so long as you are alive and Allah is guiding you. I don't know, Shaykh, if we should keep going. It's gotten pretty late.
We could close.
Yeah, inshallah. You want me to close?
Sure.
All right. I apologize if we didn't get to your questions. I came in today really hopeful. Yesterday was long. Today's not going to be long, but it ended up being just as long. May Allah reward everyone for sticking with us. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes these moments of ibadah and dhikr. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts these moments as moments of worship. I know we're not spending them in Salah, even though this is a time that is primed for Salah. But inshallah, these are moments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks upon with a look of love and acceptance, and that the angels have been surrounding us this entire time. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who are from ulul albab, from the people of the lub, the people of the inside of the heart, and people of a purified heart. May we all meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, with a purified heart, and may we be allowed to enter Jannat al-Firdaus, and may we be given the beautiful Jannahs of this life, so that we may also experience the beautiful Jannahs of the hereafter. Wa jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Jazakumullah.